I know.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Hey,
Wait a
Yay!
minute, you couldn't hear the music.
No, it was all garbled.
Oh God, I am so sorry. Well, that stinks. Here, I thought I was doing something cool. But
can hear you
anyway,
perfect now.
how are y'all doing tonight?
Good. I'm doing
You're
good.
going up. You're going up against Donald Trump. What is this?
I know.
Yeah. Well, my guess is that, some people are going to be kind of all um politics out, and I'm hoping that well, I know I am. Like I'm just like I'm so done with like it's like constant. And I think that with everything that's been going on, it just constantly pushes me back to what we're doing because there isn't a day that goes by or anything I hear now, and tell me if you agree, that I don't hear it through the lens of these letters. And even like including the things that I do with my time, right? And so because we didn't really do justice to the 13th letter, because 12 was a long conversation, and rightly so. It's a incredible, it's one of the most incredible chapters, I think, and it's definitely one of the most foundational to everything that he's driving at. um I think that it was correct. And initially, like I told you guys, we were going to try to do 3 chapters a night. And I found that that was kind of stringent, and it wasn't really allowing the conversation to flow. And for people, the insights that people are sharing have been so incredible, that I don't know, like anybody who's ever read the book before, I think I would liken it to me reading it by myself. I would liken it to basically like the difference between a traditional ultrasound and the 3D ultrasounds. Now you can practically make out who the child actually looks like in the womb. And hearing everybody's insights while we're going back and doing this deep dive together has really given this book new life to me. And so um as I fetch Uncle Screwtape, anybody want to share, like, kind of their reflections so far as we've been reading?
Well, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think I've read this book 2 or 3 times, but and I think it's true of anything. If you sit and you discuss it like this, the deeper meaning comes out, and that's the one of the things I love that we can do in these spaces, especially with something like this, or is be able to sit and talk about it like that, because you get so much more out of it. It's we have better heads together. I just basically I'm just repeating what you're saying, but yeah. And I mean, this I trying to think of, just I'm going over sort of letter 13 before we even started. I'm very excited to see where I we go with it today, because I know what I got out of it just reading it again, but what are we going to get out of it together? So this has been great for me.
What do you think, Dominique?
Well, I think you know that I've been absolutely loving these spaces. They're the highlight of my week. And I don't know if that says, how fun my weeks are, or or that I have incredible taste in the company I like to keep. Maybe a
Sure.
bit of both. Uh,
Yes.
but I got to say, you were talking about politics, and all I want to respond to that is book 15. That's it. That's all. And I'll expound on what I mean by that if we end up getting a chance to unpack that one today. But book 15.
I'm sorry, you said book 15 is all you have to say about that? I missed the first part. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I said we were mentioning politics and, kind of being all politicked out. And I was thinking very much about what's going on politically in the US, but also here in Canada and around the world when I was reading chapter or book 15. There's quite a bit in there that really speaks to my heart on that. And I hope we get to it today, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I hope so too. And what was I gotta tell you, like, so seeing this through, seeing these letters through the lens, or seeing everything through the lens of these letters rather. I'm part of the Divisive network. Divisive Content is the admin, and so we do live streaming, all sorts of things. They're on Rumble and Kick and stuff. And so he was doing a live stream tonight, and he was interviewing a guy that wrote a book about addiction. And forgive me, I wrote down his name, but I don't have it in front of me. And so the question that as Divisive was interviewing him, the question he asked, he started to say, I've been going around to college campuses and talking to people at like rallies and stuff. And he said, I noticed is that I ask people the same question, what do you do for fun? And they just are like, nothing. And he was like, it was so surprising to me. These are young people. He's gone to TPAC and these types of conferences. And he said, I remember when I'd be hiking, I'd be, biking, golfing, whatever. And immediately letter 12 jumped into my mind because that's where he's talking about keeping him in not only the mundane, but basically keeping him from thinking about the Lord and how to work on sort of his dryness and the fact that he's grown sort of cold or at best lukewarm, and then all the distractions, the distractions come, and right down to doing things that he didn't like and wasting his time on everything that meant nothing. And the quote at the end, where I have a patient down here now that stated, I have spent my life not only not doing what I ought, but also not doing what I wanted. And so when he was talking, so when Divisive asked that question, it was getting into addiction and how people, fall into addiction. I was like, I was spamming I was spamming the comments. Divisive, this is exactly what we're talking about. And my gosh, this is so sad because we're so plagued with this, but it brought everything into perfect perspective. And by the way, if you guys didn't happen to notice, I am stalling a little bit because I think that Will overslept. He takes a nap before the space. So, which is fine, which is fine. But we're going to, because this is a recap of 13, but we are going to go ahead and go back through it. And I thought that we wouldn't read the whole thing, but I think it's good because we spent so little time on it, and it'll be a good refresher course for everybody too, especially people who couldn't stay up that late. So, Heidi, may I ask you to please do the honors and read letter 13? And also, if anybody doesn't have the book, I put screenshots of chapter 13 up in the nest so you can follow along as she's speaking. Sound good?
I'm happy to fill in. I will use a poor excuse for a British accent, but I can't do what Will does, but I'll do what I can. So here we go. Letter 13. My dear Wormwood, it seems to me that you take a great many pages to tell a very simple story. The long and the short of it is that you have let the man slip through your fingers. The situation is very grave, and I really see no reason why I should try to shield you from the consequences of your inefficiency. A repentance and renewal of what the other side call grace on the scale which you describe is a defeat of the first order. It amounts to a second conversion, and probably on a deeper level than the first. As you ought to have known, the asphyxiating cloud which prevented your attacking the patient on his walk back from the old mill is a well-known phenomenon. It is the enemy's most barbarous weapon, and generally appears when he is directly present to the patient under certain modes not yet fully classified. Some humans are permanently surrounded quiet and therefore inaccessible to us. And now for your blunders. On your own showing, you first of all allowed the patient to read a book he really enjoyed, because he enjoyed it, and not in order to make clever remarks about it to his new friends. In the second place, you allowed him to walk down to the old mill and have tea there, or walk through the country he really likes, and take in alone. In other words, you allowed him two real positive pleasures. Were you so ignorant as not to see the danger of this? The characteristic of pains and pleasures is that they are unmistakably real, and therefore, as far as they go, give the man who feels them a touchstone of reality. Thus, if you had been trying to damn your man by the romantic method, by making him a kind of child herald or Werther submerged in self-pity for imaginary distresses, you would try to protect him at all costs from any real pain. Because, of course, 5 minutes genuine toothache would reveal the romantic sorrows for the nonsense they were and unmask your whole stratagem. But you were trying to damn your patient by the world. That is by palming off vanity, bustle, irony, and expensive tedium as pleasures. How can you have failed to see that a real pleasure was the last thing you ought to have let him meet? Didn't you foresee that it would just kill by contrast all the trumpery which you have been so laboriously teaching him to value? And that the sort of pleasure which the book and the walk gave him was the most dangerous of all, that it would peel off from his sensibility the kind of crust you have been forming on it, and make him feel that he was coming home, recovering himself, as a preliminary to detaching him from the enemy. You wanted to detach him from himself, and had made some progress in doing so. Now, all that is undone. Of course, I know that the enemy also wants to detach men from themselves, but in a different way. Remember always that he really likes the little vermin, and sets an absurd value on the distinctness of every one of them. When he talks of their losing their selves, he only means abandoning their clamor of self-will. Once they have done that, he really gives them back all their personality, and boasts, I am afraid sincerely, that when they are wholly his, they will be more themselves than ever. Hence, while he is delighted to see them sacrificing even their innocent wills to his, he hates to see them drifting away from their own nature for any other reason. And we should always encourage them to do so. The deepest likings and impulses of any man are the raw material, the starting point with which the enemy has furnished him. To get him away from those is therefore always the point gained. Even in things indifferent, it is always desirable to substitute the standards of the world, or convention, or fashion, for a human's own real likings and dislikings. I myself would carry this very far. I would make it a rule to eradicate from my patient any strong personal taste which is not actually a sin, even if it is something quite trivial, such as a fondness for county cricket, or collecting stamps, or drinking and disinterestedly enjoys any one thing in the world for its own sake, and without caring twopence what other people say about it, is by that very fact forearmed against some of our subtlest modes of attack. You should always try to make the patient abandon the people or food or books he really likes in favor of the best people, the right food, the important books. I have known a human defended from strong temptations to social ambition by a still stronger taste for tripe and onions. It remains to consider how we can retrieve this disaster. The great thing is to prevent his doing anything, as long as he does not convert it into action. It does not matter how much he thinks about this new repentance. Let the little brute wallow in it. Let him, if he has any bent that way, write a book about it. That is often an excellent way of sterilizing the seeds which the enemy plants in a human soul. Let him do anything but act. No amount of piety in his imagination and affections will harm us if we can keep it out of his will. As one of the humans has said, active habits are strengthened by repetition, but passive ones are weakened. The more often he feels without acting, the less he will be able ever to act. And, in the long run, the less he will be able to feel. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
So it ended up that I didn't have. You did a brilliant job. Like, seriously, big round of applause, Heidi. That was brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much. And scene. So, so I'm gonna go back because I have some questions that I hope that you can help me out with because I'm not exactly sure myself what they mean. Okay. So going back to the beginning of the letter. All right. So first, my question is, uh, okay, as you ought to have known, the asphyxiating cloud which prevented you attacking the patient on his walk back from the old mill is a well known phenomenon. It is the enemy's most barbarous weapon, and generally appears when he is directly present to the patient under certain modes, not yet fully classified. Some humans are permanently surrounded by it and therefore inaccessible to us. So, this is something that Screwtape doesn't quite understand himself. This cloud, this asphyxiating cloud that some of us are constantly protected by, or, basically. What is this, Dominique? What do you think that this asphyxiating cloud is?
Um, I think it's God's grace, and while we all have, I mean, God is ready to give His grace to all of us. Not all of us are willing to accept it, but those who are surrounded by sanctifying grace and embracing it are impenetrable, really. And if anybody here has ever had an opportunity to see the exorcism of Emily Rose, I suggest you rewatch it and keep in mind that that is a big part of that journey. And I don't want to give away the end, but I really do believe, and I'll land with this. My mentor worked with a young woman, he and Father Ripperger, who was possessed by 1,000 demons. She had been born into a family of Satanists, and they were able to exorcise all but one, and that last one was Satan himself. But she was able to live a life of virtue and holiness because she was surrounded by God's sanctifying grace. And she lived every day. She went to Mass, she received the sacraments, she prayed all day, every day. And it's the power of sanctifying grace. So that's what I assume it is. I could be wrong, but that's my perception.
Excellent. What is your take on it, Heidi?
I think it's more. I mean, I think that's part of it for sure. But I think if you are reading the Bible, God uses a cloud constantly when He appears. It's God's presence. So again, it's God's activity and the Holy Spirit, sort of as Dominic said. But if you're referencing the Bible, right, there's the cloud that comes down over the tabernacle that follows them through the desert, right? Through the wilderness. A cloud covered the tent and the tabernacle and other holy places. That cloud would come down into the temple where, when Solomon's temple, a cloud covered Jesus and the disciples and on the mount during the transfiguration. So, and it goes further for the Pentecostal and all of these things. I think what Lewis is doing is this would be asphyxiating to the devil, right, to these demons. This cloud is the very presence of God coming out to him, and they're surrounded by it. So I would also add that Lewis was in World War I, so he was well acquainted with some asphyxiating clouds. The the uh, the warfare they used during the war. So if I can't remember the gas, but it was
Mustard
it wasn't
gas.
mustard gas. Thanks,
Yeah.
Patrick. Yeah, so that I think that he's using that imagery that he probably experienced of that cloud and that smoke and that confusion, saying that that's what it would be like for demons, the very presence of God. That's what I would say
That's
of
a
that.
brilliant
That's why it's
insight.
up.
That's a brilliant insight. You have such tremendous. You're like, so Heidi is a literary genius. If you haven't picked up on that yet, she is. She has such depth perception where literature comes from, and also she's in the process of writing a book, which is a follow up to her pin post, which is the book that she released last year, I think it was, Heidi. And so,
I did.
sorry.
For Yes, I did. I released it last year. It's heavily influenced by this particular gentleman we're studying right now, I would
Very
say.
interesting. So, Patrick, do you have anything to add to that? Because you always have a lot to say and some great insights. So, I would love to
I
hear.
Yeah, I kind of look at those two together, and that's what I see. Actually, what Heidi said, the Shekinah glory, I guess it's called, of the cloud Virgin Mary. I see all kinds of imagery, actually, but it is definitely a grace. Some they can't access at all. I think there's allusions to kind of some mystical things, people that where there's places Satan cannot get to, I guess. I'm not one of them. I can be gotten to sometimes. God help me. Anyway, I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a thing that, and I'll kind of lean into the problem with pain. Uh, it's the thing that we don't understand. Some people just seem to go through life untouched, unwavering, with constant joy, though they're prayerful, etc. But then the next person who seems to be the same sort of a person suffers greatly. And that's a question that's why that this particular passage is so interesting, because he says some are surrounded by it for their entire life and they're impenetrable. And that also kind of calls back what Dominique just said. Patrick, go ahead, please.
That's what I wanted to take off from. I had forgotten with Dominique. Helped me personally, actually. I think uh, there's not possession or anything. I think that's an extreme case. I understand that, but there's certain things I've noticed in practicing. In my case, Catholicism for a long time every day that I'm like, Lord, I don't understand why these things don't leave me. I pray and ask them all the time. And I thought about the fact that maybe God is saying, no, you're going to carry this and still practice this faith and do your best to grow through it. And some of them are I will be honest, in my personal take, and I bring them to confession, are troubling. I'm like, why do I think some of these thoughts? And they kind of come out, and I'm like, I don't want this. Where the hell does this come from? Pardon my French. Um, but I think they're thorns in the flesh or concupiscence, whatever they are in that moment. They're like, I think God has a purpose for it that I can still practice and act out the faith. So Dominique saying that helped me see it that way a little more, and I think that's good.
I
And God's
begged God
grace,
3
and
times to remove this thorn from my
yeah,
side. No, no. My grace is sufficient. So he allows us to suffer in this life, and that like of course sanctifying grace and the suffering we do here on earth has tremendous merit to us as Catholics. Um it's sort of the divine it's a certain divine grace. And if our goal is to get to heaven, then this life is a blip on the screen, right? So he chooses our paths. And, there's been a lot of talk. I will just land that with this, and then I'm going to go to the next point, the next bullet point. Some of us are allowed to suffer in certain ways. And we hear a lot of people question the existence of God or say such things as a loving God would never allow a child to, suffer in the ways that we see orphans suffer or other atrocities. And the only thing I can say about that is I don't know what why these things happen. I do know that every action that I do or don't do affects the entire world. So sin affects everybody. And then also, God has a plan for each human being. So that's the only way I can reconcile it. And I would say also that it's not a question of why, or it's not a question of, n- it's immeasurable. We don't know God's plans for anyone else's life. And that example that you gave of Emily Rose is a very good one, because for all intent and purpose, she was a good girl. She did everything right. And I don't want to spoil the plot either, but at the very end, she has a vision of Mary, and it pretty much ties up what we're discussing right now. So going back to when he's talking about, because while we're here on Earth, this is how he's working on us every day. So he's talking about real positive pleasures, you know, and the characteristic, and he chides Wormwood. Did you not see the danger in this? The characteristics of pain and pleasure. The characteristic of pain and pleasure is that they are unmistakably real. And therefore, as far as they go, give the man who feels them a touchstone of reality. Thus, if you had been trying to damn your man by the romantic method, by making him a kind of herald or Werther submerged in um sorry let me go sorry I have a mark on this.
Self-pity.
Self-pity, thank you. For imaginary distress, for self-pity, for imaginary distress, you would try to protect him at all costs from any real pain, because of course 5 minutes genuine toothache would reveal the romantic sorrows for the nonsense that they were and unmask your whole stratagem. So you guys, so let's look at it this way. Like, my life is bad, whatever. Well, then you get the flu, or then let's say you have to have, let's say you break your leg. All of these imaginary problems. And by the way, I have a favorite saying: I have 99 problems, and 85 of them I've made up in my mind hypothetically for no reason at all, right? So in other words, when you're let's I had foot surgery, I remember. And I would dread going to the gym because I don't really dig running, but I do it, because it's good for me. Well, when I couldn't do it anymore because I had foot surgery, I was like, that's that was something I was wanting for terribly. God, I wish I could go back to the gym. I wish I could run again. That makes me feel good. Those like the pleasure in that pain that nobody knows about but me, that actually makes me uh, uh, that makes me come alive. It's good for my body, it's good for my attention, it's good for my sleep. All of these things I couldn't do, and I was complaining about it prior to not being able to do it. And so I think that's the point that he's kind of driving at. What would you say about that, Dominique?
Sorry, Heidi. I got distracted by family life. Sorry, not Heidi, Nancy. See, there you go. Um, I think that you're absolutely correct. I can't relate to your experience with the foot surgery, but I certainly think that our preoccupation with potential pain, potential fears, is far more detrimental to us than what we're living out. And for one is and this is something that'll get expounded on later on, but this whole idea of anticipatory anxiety, which is a huge thing for a lot of people, usually creates a far bigger problem than the immediate. So again, we see the brilliance of Screwtape again. And yes, I think you're on point.
Thank you very much. Would you like to add anything, Heidi?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of pain in relation to it, yeah, I mean, there's the thing about Paul and the thorn in his side that you mentioned. But I think the thing, I have a quote from The Problem of Pain, which Lewis's book, other one of his many, right? Where it says this, and I think this sort of gives some insight into what he's pointing out here is that pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. So I think a lot of the point of this is that one of the ways God gets our, one of the best ways he gets our attention is by making us, physically uncomfortable, or to put us in actual physical pain. And it can't be ignored. So I think this is one of the things that Screwtape is trying to say. You don't want him to be uncomfortable. It's always this concept of lulling him, always making sure that he's lulled into this sort of falseness of reality, where it's this the romantics, right, with Byron and Werther down here. Child Harold is like, oh, I can't experience anything. They're kind of like, the emu or emus. It's
The
kind of that
emo. Oh, I
emo.
don't feel anything.
I
Oh,
don't feel it.
yeah.
Woe is me. It's like that kind of sort of thing where it's like everything is misery, and I have to just feel. And Lewis really likes to pick on the romantic poets because he feels they're full of it, and he has some valid points. I mean, they may have written some beautiful poetry, but it ultimately is based in a certain level of hedonism, which is exactly what Screwtape wants. It's like we want them to be, part of the romantic method, which basically is this sort of, imaginary distress. And whenever I see this, I always remember, whenever I would be when I was a kid, and whenever I was making too much of something, my mother would always say, it's like, you don't that's not a real problem. Stop focusing on these things. Start focusing on something more positive, because if you keep focusing on this stuff, you're going to have a real problem, and then you're going to really know what a problem is, which I think feeds right into your story about your foot, Nancy, because it and I think that's the point of what he's doing here. He's like saying we want to have him lulled by all these things that are sort of don't matter. They're tangential to reality. And he's furious at him for letting him go for a walk, as we would say, letting him touch grass. and seeing, something beautiful of God's creation, because it's like he had tea and he went for a walk alone of all things, where he could just think and be with God in this, and that noxious cloud has consumed him, and he was inaccessible to us. And so that's kind of what's going on here, is this idea that, you know you need to
The
divide
more they become
what is
themselves, the more that they become his. That's
right.
what
Exactly.
so
Or
we
they're
all have
honest,
these
or
silly little things that we like to do that nobody likes but us. And that's what he's kind of
right.
touching on, right? And then I gave the example, like, I like to sing karaoke by myself. I have a karaoke machine, by the way, in my own house. I like to sing. It makes me happy. So there. You know, it's part
Well,
of who I am.
the
And
point.
so, but what he's saying is that when they lose interest, when the patient loses interest in the things that make them only make them happy, in other words, they're not showing off for their friends. They're not reading a book give clever quotes to their friends. They're doing something that is unique to their soul and their being. That's when they're most in touch with their creator intimately.
Yeah, and that's exactly where it goes later. It's like, make sure that they're reading books, nothing that he actually likes. You know, don't you have to, it has to be what everybody else thinks is popular, the best, that's favored by the best people, the right food, the important books. And he said this, and this one man's strongest defense against us was that he liked to eat tripe and onions. I mean, it's that simplicity. It's not doing it to please the world.
And so to that point also, yes, because what makes me popular is vanity. What makes me happy are the things that I do on a daily basis, which one might call self-care. And I'm not talking about like a skincare regime, but I mean, if it makes you feel good inside, good for you. Great. But because you're saying to yours, it's because that is, something like that, or like eating well or taking vitamins, you know, it's not about how I look to you, but it's how I look to me. And so that is the thing that people drop when they no longer care. And he's telling him to keep him in that position where they're not doing the daily things that remind themselves of their uniqueness, their qualities, and that, I am lovable. I am worth my life, or I am myself. And so, the most tragic part, I think, really comes in the end, because when we tie it all together, what Screwtape is doing to his patient is just this. It remains to consider how we can retrieve this disaster of, this gentleman just finding pleasure in something that, drinking tea and taking a walk by himself. The great thing is to prevent his doing anything, as long as he does not convert it into action. It does not matter how much he thinks about this new repentance. Let the little brute wallow in it. Let him, if he has any bent that way, write a book about it. So he's telling him, like, write a book about your self pity, or like what you're going through. That is often an excellent way of sterilizing the seed which the enemy plants in a human soul. Let him do anything but act. No amount of piety in his imagination and affections will harm us if we can keep it out of his will. As one of the humans had said, active habits are strengthened by repetition, but passive ones are weakened. The more often he feels without acting, the less he will be able ever to act. And in the long run, and this breaks my heart, the less he will be able to feel. And there's a whole biochemical reality behind that too. It's called a dopamine drip, or it's called adrenaline. It's called the things, it's called, even thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't get this done, you know, then if I fail, so for example, failure i- is failure to plan, you know, planning is planning to fail. So, in other words, keep them out of that sort of willful, I'm going to do this because it really makes me a better person, but rather, no, let them think about it. Or even better, I would say, we can all think of times where we're really doing well in our lives, I think. And so, for example, there was a time in my life, and I just, like getting back to this, work was great. I was getting up in the morning and working out, and I was on a strict nutritional program, and I knew everything about what I was doing because I'm also a nutritionist and a certified personal trainer. So I knew everything to do, and I was doing it. Now, here I am 10 years later, not so good. So I could teach people all of these things that I'm very good at teaching and really want to help them. But at the end of the day, I would just be teaching other people. I would not be taking care of this person. I would just be mirrored in thought. And that's a different sort of a tragedy. What would you say about that, Dominique?
Uh, yes, absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna say something, and I hope I don't get a bunch of arrows thrown at me, and I'll explain what I mean by it. There's a saying that one of my professors at university used to say: "Those who can do, those who can't teach, and those who can't teach the teachers." Now, that doesn't mean that we should never write anything down. That doesn't mean that we should never teach people things, but it does mean that we should spend more time actively doing the things that we are recommending others to do, thereby teaching through osmosis and through our actions, not just our words. And another example that comes to mind is, now I know a lot of people are list makers. Lists make me crazy. They overwhelm me, and this is a problem I've had a large portion of my life. But another thing that lists do to me, and this is my issue, is that when I put something down on a piece of paper as something to do, there's a part of me that in my head I've already done it. And oftentimes there are little things that we'll notice and we'll say, oh, yeah, I got to get that done. I'll do it later. And then we tick off this little checklist in our mind, move on, and then don't end up doing it. Now, sometimes we have to put it off because you can't do 40 million things at once. But there is this level at which we can tell ourselves all these great plans that we have for the future, but we can also start just doing them in the moment. And this is what Screwtape wants us to avoid doing, is actively participating in the things we know we should do rather than just ruminating on all the things we should be doing and not getting them done. And then finally, I would like to also bring us back to this one little portion that really hit my heart, and that is where Screwtape says he really gives them back all their personality and boasts, I'm afraid sincerely, that when they are wholly his, they will be more themselves than ever. And isn't this just his way of acknowledging that when we see ourselves through God's eyes, we see ourselves most clearly. Now, can we do it perfectly? No, but should we strive to? Yes. And this is exactly what he wants us not to do. Anyway, so just a few thoughts there.
Yeah, and it seems like he's constantly referring back to St. Paul. Why do I constantly do what I don't want to do? Or I'm sorry, why do I constantly do what I don't want to do? Why don't I do what I want to do? And oh gosh, I better not say it because I might be conflating two sets of letters by saying it. I was thinking that this is part of the same letter or the same group of people he was speaking to when he talked about the thorn in his side, but I don't want to get it wrong. So, guys, please, anybody else have anything to say before Heidi gives us her brilliant English accent? Or, Patrick, if you would like to read too, if you have the book, you're more than welcome to. I want to get as many people in to talk as possibly can
Yes.
because, yes, sir.
Well, I would love to. Heidi, you were way too good. You were very good at that. And I love Will. Will's fantastic, but you were very good.
Yeah,
And I would not do that well. I know that right now. So I'd rather have Heidi do
yeah.
that if she's willing.
I didn't want to put her on
I'm
the
still
spot again. So.
no, it's okay. It's well, I'm working on doing an audiobook right now, so
Oh, it's good.
technically I've
Oh,
been
sweet,
practicing.
sweet. Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, so my book will be an audiobook hopefully in the next not to this is not the place to be selling things, but that's what I've been practicing.
We're here to
And I
support you.
had to do some nasty people last night. I was working on it. So anyway, I'm happy to do it. If Patrick wants to go, if anyone else would like to
No, no,
read,
no,
I
no,
think
no,
that
no, no. With that being said, please, please,
right.
please, please
All
reveal
right.
us. And also, guys, I did put up the chapter 14 so you can follow along. I think it really does help as you're listening. You also look at the words that he's saying because I think things will jump out at you. So please refer back to those. I know they look tiny, but you just have to scroll through the screenshots. Okay?
All right. Shall we?
Yes, let's go,
All
Uncle
right.
Screwtape.
All right. Letter 14. My dear Wormwood, the most alarming thing in your last account of the patient is that he is making none of those confident resolutions which marked his original conversion. No more lavish promises of perpetual virtue, I gather, not even the expectation of an endowment of grace for his life, but only a hope for the daily and hourly pittance to meet the daily and hourly temptation. This is very bad. I see only one thing to do at the moment. Your patient has become humble. Have you drawn his attention to that fact? All virtues are less formidable to us once the man is aware that he has them. But this is specially true of humility. Catch him at the moment when he is really poor in spirit, and smuggle into his mind the gratifying reflection, by Jove, I'm being humble, and almost immediately pride at his own humility will appear. If he awakes to the if he awakes to the danger and tries to smother this new form of pride, make him proud of his attempt, and so on, through as many stages as you please. But don't try this too long, for fear you awake his sense of humor and proportion, in which case he will merely laugh at you and go to bed. But there are other profitable ways of fixing his attention on the virtue of humility. By this virtue, as by all the others, our enemy wants to turn the man's attention away from self to him, and to the man's neighbors. All the objection and self-hatred are designed, in the long run, solely for this end. Unless they attain this end, they do us little harm, and they may even do us good if they keep the man concerned with himself. And above all, if self-contempt can be made the starting point for contempt of other selves, and thus for gloom, cynicism, and cruelty, you must therefore conceal from the patient the true end of humility. Let him think of it not as self-forgetfulness, but as a certain kind of opinion, namely, a low opinion of his own talents and character. Some talents, I gather, he really has. Fix in his mind the idea that humility consists in trying to believe those talents to be less valuable than he believes them to be. No doubt they are, in fact, less valuable than he believes, but that is not the point. The great thing is to make him value an opinion for some quality other than truth, thus introducing an element of dishonesty and make believe into the heart of what otherwise threatens to become a virtue. By this method, thousands of humans have been brought to think that humility means pretty women trying to believe they are ugly, and clever men trying to believe they are fools. And since what they are trying to believe may, in some cases, be manifest nonsense, they cannot succeed in believing it, and we have the chance of keeping their minds endlessly revolving on themselves in an effort to achieve the impossible. To anticipate the enemy's strategy, we must consider his aims. The enemy wants to bring the man to a state of mind in which he could design the best cathedral in the world, and know it is to be the best, and rejoice in the fact, without being any more or less, or otherwise glad at having done it than he would be if it had been done by another. The enemy wants him, in the end, to be so free from any bias in his own favor that he can rejoice in his own talents as frankly and gratefully as in his neighbor's talents, or in a sunrise, an elephant, or a waterfall. He wants each man, in the long run, to be able to recognize all creatures, even himself, as glorious and excellent things. He wants to kill their animal self-love as soon as possible. But it is his long-term policy, I fear, to restore to them a new kind of self-love, a charity and gratitude for all selves, including their own. When they have really learned to love their neighbors as themselves, they will be allowed to love themselves as their neighbors. For we must never forget what is the most repellent and inexplicable trait in our enemy. He really loves the hairless bipeds he has created, and always gives back to them with his right hand what he has taken away with his left. His whole effort, therefore, will be to get the man's mind off the subject of his own value altogether. He would rather the man thought himself a great architect or a great poet and then forget about it, than that he should spend much time and pains trying to think himself a bad one. Your efforts to instill either vain glory or false modesty into the patient will therefore be met from the enemy's side with the obvious reminder that a man is not usually called upon to have an opinion of his own talents at all, since he can very well go on improving them to the best of his ability without deciding on his own precise niche in the temple of fame. You must try to exclude this reminder from the patient's consciousness at all costs. The enemy will also try to render real in the patient's mind a doctrine which they all profess but find it difficult to bring home to their feelings. The doctrine that they did not create themselves, that their talents were given them, and that they might as well be proud of the color of their hair. But always and by all methods, the enemy's aim will be to get the patient's mind off such questions, and yours will be to fix it on them. Even of his sins, the enemy does not want him to think too much. Once they are repented, the sooner the man turns his attention outward, the better the enemy is pleased. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Bravo, Heidi. Bravo. I want you to have authentic pride in your ability to read because obviously you do an excellent job and you deserve those flowers. And I know that on a certain level, you know you do this well. And you also thank God for this talent because it makes you who you are. And um, all glory to God for your talents in authentic pride. And I know you don't have false modesty. Love it. So going back to that. All right. And that's this. Okay. This chapter, in a sense, is mind blowing because he's literally calling out how we can make humility a vice. So, in other words, if I am really good at something and I'm just like, well, oh gosh, no, I'm not that good at it. Oh, thank you, but oh, I just, you know, I'm a martyr. It's hard, Um, if we don't realize, first of all, that this is a gift. Second of all, that, by denouncing it, it's a certain other type of vanity. Why? Because we want to be appreciated by how humble we are instead of actually, and but not only that, yet we want the world to see how humble we are. And beg your pardon, but Joel Osteen comes to mind. And so, for lack of a better way of saying it, um, that is kind of the precipice of this entire conversation. So before I go to my beautiful and wonderful and extremely insightful co-host, I would like to welcome my friend CJ. We've had some very great conversations in other spaces, and so I want to give you a chance to say hello, sir. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for letting me up. Really enjoying the space and great job, Heidi. If it was you that was just speaking, right? Um, but what I got from it was, yeah, almost exactly what you just said. Like there are that ego and pride are dangerous, but self-love and love of the universe is really what is important, and the positive side of it. So like you don't want to mistake self-love for ego. And like you said, like, oh, you're so humble, but everyone should be notified like for their accomplishments. Everyone should feel good about them, and everyone has something they can feel good about.
You're absolutely right. And then taking a step forward, I have this belief about self-esteem, and tell me what you think about this. Versus ego, pride, false humility. So when you accomplish something, there's a lot to work through, right? And so, and this also invokes the difference between happiness and pleasure. Um, and I would say that happiness has to do with working, achieving, accomplishing something that was really hard that nobody can take away from you. So, for example, if you have graduated from, college and you have a degree, well, you accomplished that, right? Good, good. Lots of people don't, own that. If you run a marathon, good. You worked really hard to do that. Nobody can take that away from you. And this is not fleeting. It's not instantaneous gratification. So going all the way back to um, the my theory, which is the self-esteem theory, it's basically looking at yourself and all the your time, treasures, talents, the blessings that God has bestowed on you that are different from other people's, and you might be super blessed in a certain way. Um, and really acknowledging the way that God has blessed you and really owning that as part of what makes you unique, but at the same time, being very self aware of the things that you're not good at and perhaps you really stink at. You're really bad. And acknowledging that and realizing that these are the parts of my life that really need some examination. And really, these are the things that I'm bad at that I need to work at. But at the end of the day, I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm bad at. And that will be enough. so I don't have to pretend like I'm not good at certain things, and I don't have to wear a mask about the things that I'm bad at. That's my self-esteem theory. And I think that that's what, to me, that's what we're touching on here. But we're going to go to like specific parts of the letter later, but well, first I'd like to, and I would like to welcome Jen. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you as always. I always love hearing you speak in spaces. No pressure. If you feel like giving your insights, please do, milady. So, Dominique, you don't have to abbreviate this at all. Tell us about what you feel. Tell us about what you think about chapter 14.
Well, very compelling. Few big things that stuck out for me is the distinction between true self-love and the disordered self-love that he keeps talking about. And that disordered self-love at the end of the day is really a self-hatred. And so this is where I go with this, is that from my perspective, and I think this is fairly commonly understood as Christians, is that we cannot possibly begin to imagine loving others unless we love God. And if we love God, then we must also love ourselves because He created us, right? So, in creating us, He's imparting and He's putting some of Himself into us. And that love for ourselves is a reflection of our love of God. So, what Screwtape wants us to do is reject God's creation by rejecting ourselves, and therefore move on that pathway to rejection of God Himself, and that's where they win, right? And so a couple of things come to mind. I have a son who used to get really angry at me because whenever I did something right, or well in my life, I always said, thanks be to God. You know, it's thanks to Him that I was able to accomplish this. And so one day he called me out and he said, Mom, you know, I really hate it. You never take credit for the good things you do, only for the things that you don't do well. And I said to him, because anything I do well, it's because I've allowed God to guide me. Anything I think I can accomplish by myself without God's help, typically I fall flat on my face. And that's, I mean, for me, that's been a journey of maturity and I guess gaining wisdom through experience. Um, and so there's a couple of passages in scripture that come to mind. First is Matthew 22:36-40. Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus said to him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, with thy whole soul, and with thy whole mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like this: Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, how do we love our neighbor if we don't love ourselves? But this isn't a vainglory love. This is a true love as God's creature and acknowledging His love. And then the other one is, of course, the parable of the talents, right? God gives us all talents. And if we don't recognize those talents, those gifts that God gives us, then we don't use them. We put them to waste. And what happens? What does the parable tell us about the servant who hides his talents for fear of misusing them, right? We're going to fall on our faces. We're going to make mistakes. And we pick ourselves up. We learn what those talents are. We act upon them, but always recognizing that whatever we accomplish, it's for God's greater glory. And I'll land there. I'll keep rattling on all night.
That was a mic drop, Dominique. I'm sorry. Because it's a heavy space, so let's lighten it up. That was a beautiful insight. And I'm really looking forward to streaming this to my family. Because I keep telling them, you guys got to get on X. We're doing good stuff here, you know. But yeah, the the thing of the thing that we can appreciate, or we ought to appreciate, or this should be the most fundamental part of our brains when we do anything, is this for the greater glory of God? Or does it make me look good? Uh, Heidi, what would you have to say? Like, just, you don't have to say anything about that, but just, please go ahead. Like, what were your insights?
Well,
Because I know you have a bunch.
I'll try and I think Dominique really, ran the bases on this one. But I would add the thing that a couple things in here that strike me about this sort of pride humility balance, right? Where one can become the other. It's quite readily, shall we say. And it's important to consider that. I can say from a lot of the people I know who do like create, who are creatives, shall we say, who are great, one of the things that will happen, and I think this really speaks to it, and I think this happens to a lot of people, is that they have a talent, but they sort of become, a legend in their own mind. So they'll have an idea, a spark of creativity, but nothing comes of it because they take off in their brain about the pride takes over, the fame takes over, the all of this great stuff's going to happen, and they forget the fact that even something artistic or creative is actual work. And so I think this speaks to this a, a lot about the sort of way to approach things, where it's, the thing that Screwtape says to guard against, you know, is, he thinks he has all these virtues, but if he starts going, if he doesn't have an expectation, no more lavish promises of perpetual virtue, right? I gather not even the expectation of an endowment of grace for life, but only a hope for the daily and hourly pittance, to meet the daily and hourly temptation. That's sort of the key to anything you're doing in the world. That's it right there, I think. And I think that's not to be missed. I mean, the most important thing you can do with your talents is not view them as how spectacular they are or how good you are at anything, but how you can use them hour by hour, how you can proceed further. And just the other point, I love that line where he said, this concept of, humility is, it means, pretty women trying to believe they are ugly, and clever men trying to believe they are fools. Um, that is, I mean, I see that played out so, in every little video, dare I say, Alpha Fox posts. You see a lot of that getting played out. No, and I know
No, no, keep cooking, keep cooking.
he is showing it. He's showing it, and I mean, he's showing the absurdity of it. I mean, some of he gets raunchy for sure, but he's definitely putting a lens on this kind of behavior, don't you think? And
No,
it's, I
yeah,
mean,
no,
it's
no,
to
that I
note of
didn't even come to mind, but that's an excellent point. Just
it's
going back to your original point, how we try to what I hear you saying is that, so that like pretty women try to convince themselves they're ugly, and clever men, try to convince themselves that they're stupid. That really is, so why do people do that? Well, because
they don't.
I was gonna say it's because it's all about them versus when you really understand you have a gift or a talent, or you really understand that you've worked really hard for something despite your deficiencies, you can look back at the Lord and say, thank you. Thank you for my trials. Thank you for my talents. Thank you for everything you give me, because the culmination of all of these things, if I participate in your grace and I don't get stuck in, this sort of this vanity of false humility, or this, this thing we call the ego. If I know that I just am not living for myself every day, rather, I am put on this earth to be the best version of myself. Thankfully, I am sustained even though I suffer. And I think that that's kind of what you're getting to.
Yeah, that's part of it for sure. Is an actual humility, that day to day. And I think Dominique was, when she brought up the parable of the talents, I mean, that's the thing to consider. It's like, if you have that talent, don't, any kind of talent, and I don't think we're just speaking about, something artistic. I don't know if it could be accounting. It doesn't matter, right? If you bury it, that is an insult to God,
Amen.
and that's what's
And I think, and
important.
exactly, I think that this, like, I'm so glad that Dominique brought that up, because there's a synergy there with that gospel and this particular letter. There's an absolute synergy there. I mean, I think that, as a matter of fact, if I was going to tie any letter specifically to a certain gospel, it would be the parable of the talents, and, this talk about, um, bearing the best of yourself, and the worst of yourself, and not taking a chance or a risk, or just having enough self-belief, in, or not self-belief, excuse me, not having enough faith in the Lord to take the chance with our lives that we are given on this earth.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to, you're not here. Life is not for the
Faint of
for
heart.
the for the yeah. Not sorry. What was that?
I'm teasing.
Uh,
No, actually, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
no, I didn't
I
hear.
didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but Jen had her hand up, and I really want to,
Oh, sorry.
you guys, Jen is a wonderful person, and she actually, she's quite gifted herself, and so that's not false flattery, that's not vainglory, that's actually objective, because she's an intrinsic value in and of herself, and she knows that she's not subjectively satisfying. Jen, sorry to put you on the spot. How are you doing, love?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks
I'm
for letting
Thanks
me
for
speak.
joining. Hmm.
Oh, it's just wonderful to hear everyone speak, and it's just so refreshing and uplifting to hear everybody. Um,
Jen, real quick, can you get closer to
yeah,
your
can you hear me better
microphone?
now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So as you were reading this, this is probably my favorite and most convicting chapter of this.
Jen, I'm sorry, you're a little bit muffled. Are you speaking in a Bluetooth or anything right now?
You know what? I'll drop down and come back
No,
up,
no, no,
and
no,
then
no, 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 no. Okay,
it might be
if this is
my.
the best, I want to hear what you have to say. So please, I'll strain to listen. Please go ahead,
So
milady.
is that better now?
Perfect.
Okay, it was my earphones. So I'm so sorry about that. Um, Again, this is as you were reading it, and Heidi did a great job of this. I didn't realize how much I don't want to say memorized it, but um, I could predict what was going to happen. What was going to be said, and I've heard this stuff over and over in my head. For me, it's been really important, um, and I am not. Um, Intrinsically talented or anything like that. But I think that one of the tricks that Satan plays on us is to get us kind of wrapped up in our own minds. And the the end of this, and I'm sorry I'm not very articulate, but the thing that I remember, there's two things I remember from this lot. The sooner a man turns his attention outward, the better the enemy is pleased. And to me, this chapter is about valuing what God thinks is good, and we're and we need to support that and do that, right? So if someone is good at something, right, that's great, and we say, "Yay, you're good at that," and then we all forget about it and we go on to the next thing that is good and is nice. Um and the other thing that always comes to mind is that you might as be proud of your hair color. And I love that one, because it's like if something's good, there's no point in downgrading it. But the point isn't for you to be proud of it, because those talents were given to you, and it's up to you to do something with them. And it's just for everyone's good, including your own, to do that. And I've highlighted so much of this. The enemy wants to bring the man to a state of mind in which you could design the best cathedral in the world, know it to be the best, rejoice in the fact without being any more or less glad than he would have had being done if it had been done by somebody else. And I just love that, because that to me is the essence of this. Um, and what I really like about this is Um, it's kind of funny. It's funny that um, that Screwtape had to write about this good, so to speak, that I think God actually wants us to have. I'm sorry I'm not that articulate, but this I just
Okay, so
this
so Jen, let me say just a couple of things.
yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so why do you call yourself not intrinsically talented? What you just said was extremely profound, and by the way, articulated very well.
I don't know. I just think that um I don't think I'm a fool. I just don't think I should sound superior or something like that. And
I did not get the impression at
oh,
all
that's good.
that you were trying to sound superior.
Yeah.
As a
So
matter of
no,
fact, as a
but
matter of fact, what I heard you saying
yeah,
was something very, very worthwhile by your own study and by, your own understanding
yeah.
of yourself in a true measure of the Lord.
Well, thank you.
And and so I guess what my question is, you know, and I don't mean to put you on the spot at all,
No, that's
but
okay.
But again, Jen, what you said, I could hear that you've actually read this. You've taken the time to examine yourself. You've taken the time to look at yourself in a very honest way through the eyes of the Lord. And so I understand the temptation to say, wow, I'm not all that because, eh, I have a lot of work to do on myself. But I can see at the same time, you have really put in the work humbly.
Well, thank you. Um that's where the part of the book comes in where you have to laugh and go to bed. In terms of the humility, right? Because um it'll again it can just spiral down, and you go, oh, I'm being humble about being humble, and and all that. So um there is a point where I'll kind of talk like I guess I was in my head, and then I'll just go to bed. And so I appreciate you pointing that out. But I do think it's important to be humble and not self-depreciating. And to be honest with you, I don't think of it that often. It's just that I'm so impressed and moved by what people have said in your spaces that I'm just honored to be here. And I guess that's what I'm saying.
Well, Jen, I'm honored that you're here, first of all. But then second of all, um, here's the thing, you know, if you know, there are so many faults and details in my own life, you know, at the same time, I do realize that we go through peaks and valleys in our lives, you know, and everybody's coming on their own path. But if we keep our eyes fixed on the Lord, um, and really, so like me doing this space, I just like the book, and
Yeah.
but I'm fortunately surrounded by people such as yourself and Dominique and Heidi, CJ, Patrick, Diana, Jackie, Ellie, Peter, like all of you guys, thank you so much. I open these spaces because I need to learn. Literally, like you have no idea how much I have been like, how blessed I feel to be surrounded by you guys. And so like to just kind of take it back, this is the unromantic part. I could get lost in my thoughts and just pontificate and bloviate about things that I've learned from all of you. I could go into any space and listen to all of you speak and sound so much smarter because I'm surrounded by you guys. No, 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 no. God has blessed me with all of you, you know, and I'm kind of at a loss for words right now. I mean, this is a, a bit profound.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words, and I'm learning a lot. So, um, thank you so much.
No, 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 Jen, thank you. And I'll try to tie my point together better. I just it's just it's a little too much right right now. And so but praise God. Anyways, Dominique, please go ahead.
Yeah, Jen, thank you. You gave a beautiful contribution, and I'm going to speak for everybody here. I know everybody here appreciates what you shared with us, and I think this is where we sometimes get bogged down and caught up. Even in the parable of the talents, I think often we go to these great talents and gifts, the great artist and the great singer and writer and architect and physicist, but we forget that talents can be down to the minutia. The person who has the capacity to smile every day when they get up and walk out the door, and change someone's day just by looking at them with a smile. The person who loves to welcome people into their home and make sure there's a little flowers and maybe some baked goods when company comes over. The person who will stop and turn to someone when they look like they're in distress and say, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need any help?" These are all the talents that God gives us, but we forget about them because they're small and mundane. And those are exactly the things that Screwtape wants us to forget about, right? Which is why he got so angry in the previous chapter about the fact that the patient was allowed to enjoy the simplicity of the small things, right? The big things are important, but it's in the small things that we rise and we fall. And so I think everybody here who's contributed in one way, shape, or form has brought so much to these discussions. I look forward to them every week because I learn from each and every person who brings a comment or shares an experience in their life. And I just want to tie this in really quickly to a space we did yesterday. And I'm going to plug that space. And we'll be having once a week because Diana's here. So I want to plug it. Is our Authentic Femininity, Real Women, Real Talk space. And one of the things we talked about was the importance of supporting one another. And that doesn't mean, flowers when they're undeserved, but we support each other in our rise and in our fall. And I think we need to remember sometimes when we fall the hardest, we learn the most, but people around us can also learn the most. And I'll end there.
Well, I would also say, like, I would take it back to, kind of the point that you made. It's sort of it's the smiling garbage man. You know, it's the whistling janitor. And just to give you an example, of also what people in those positions are up against, because I'm a nurse. I know how, you know, um, how janitorial was treated. Now, what really drove this home was when my son was at university, and he had to work like 3 jobs, with paying for college or whatnot. One of the things, so he was a research assistant, and he was doing homeless ministry, but I told him to go become a janitor in Weirton Hospital, which was like a half an hour away. And so, he would tell me, like, he was working midnights, and so they couldn't wear headphones or whatever. And basically, like, he would just whistle while just to keep himself, like, washing the floor. And he said, "Mom, you know, I'll just be whistling in a room while I'm cleaning it. And a nurse will walk by and say, 'What makes you so happy?' And I'm just whistling." And okay, I'd listen. Yeah, yeah, that kind of stinks. But you're making like 13 bucks an hour. That's good. So at the end of the summer, you know, I asked him, "So what was your takeaway from this experience as a janitor?" And he said, "Mom, I will never treat anybody the way that I was treated." And so now he is Dr. Christian Bittner. So he is going to carry that experience and give grace to other people because he went through it himself. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's a thing there, you know, trying to be happy in whatever your vocation is, because that could be all glory to God. you know thank you for this job. Thank you for worthwhile work. Thank you for the opportunity to support myself. There's dignity in all work. many people in the society will try to tell you that based on your station, there isn't. But again, we've all seen the videos of a, like of a garbage man just happy to spread joy and to have a job. And so I guess what I'm saying is that there's also a caveat there that I think Screwtape would talk about, which is especially in this letter, that's humble gratitude, right? Humble gratitude. I don't however I'm being treated, I'm going to make the best of this regardless of the circumstance. Taking a step forward, what he's telling Wormwood to do in this particular letter is keep him a little bit arrogant. Keep him in the realm of look at what good I'm doing, and keep him in the position of if I pretend to be humble, or if I, if I feign humility, but while I'm also, what's cooking in the back burner is the fact that, I'm going to talk to my most fashionable friends. That's the part that, we talked about yesterday, or I'm sorry, in the last space. That is the part that is the slow play, the comfortable slope, because there is no actual pain there, and there really is not a reality of any kind of true humility or suffering. You wanted to follow up, Jen?
Uh, yeah, sorry, I lost my thought there. I saw Dominique wanted to speak, so go ahead.
Sure, let's go ahead with Dominique, but I know
Yeah,
you're
I'll
collected,
come
Jen.
back. Yeah.
I just, when you talked about the garbage man, I just want to share a really brief story about the beauty of the little things. When my kids were really small, we had a guy who would come pick up our garbage once a week. His name was Daryl. We actually got to know him by name. And my daughter at the time would sit in the window in great anticipation for Daryl to come that one day a week. And she would wave at him. And then eventually she would go out and she'd bring him a picture or a lollipop, and he would let her press the button. Well, years later, I see him again. He's retired, and he took me aside and he said, I got to tell you that your kids made my week. I couldn't wait to come by your house to see those smiles. They brought so much joy. We don't understand where our talents are a lot of the time. It's in the little things.
So I don't mind sharing this with you. So the holiest man that I've ever known is my dad. And so there are 12 of us. And so dairy farmer his entire life. Once pretty much every like small dairy farm lost everything. Um he never ceased to pray, and he never ceased to pray the rosary, and he never complained. As a matter of fact, so after our family sold the farm, which didn't work out well, like long suffering, if you will. He went and got a job as a janitor in our local high school, which, by the way, was where my brother was the head football coach and a teacher. And my dad was so overjoyed to have this job because he would tell me stories about like the kids in the like just the conversations that they would have. And also, he would tell me, yeah, there's a weight room, and so sometimes I go in there and I lift a couple of things. And but the thing it did is it put him close to the athletes. And my dad was an extreme, like, he played football for that high school, by the way, you know, and he was a nose tackle at 145 pounds. But point being that he found joy in the work. Why? Because he had insurance, and he found joy in the kids, which he always he he always found joy in serving everyone. And so I think that like this letter speaks to me because it makes me think of my dad. He, he was a truly, truly humble human being that happened to have 12 children, 45 grandchildren, and then died with 15, no, I'm sorry, 19 great grandchildren. And he lived a life of service. And so, sorry guys, that's why this letter is so significant to me. Who am I to suffer? Anyway.
You know, my grandfather was like that. Um, and so I feel your pain. But
It's joy, Jen. Honestly, I'm so thankful. I can't even tell you. That's what's humbling is when I look at my dad and everything he did. I'm nowhere near that,
well,
but I'm blessed with it. Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, when my grandfather died, so we were at his funeral, and um, the minister said, "Well, I was going to tell you about Jesus and his life," and and it sounds like this person, lived that, and I mean, I was just in awe of him, and I'm very happy and blessed that I had that example. But it's painful to see, what he went through, and if I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think about the letter that's written here, when I think about my grandpa, I think this was a man who did what he needed to do at the time, like what God asked him to do at the time, and it didn't matter if someone else thought it was important or not. He did important things, and he did things that people might think weren't important, but they were important because they were the right thing to do, and um, they made people happy. He was positive when other people weren't, and I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, no,
that.
it totally does. It totally does. But also, kind of going back to the original part of that letter, and I have to go all the way back because this was, I'm sorry, this was the last letter that this actually was said in the last letter, and I don't think you were here. Um, I would like to go back to this,
Yeah,
like Heidi and Dominique, this asphyxiating cloud that
Yeah.
that Screwtape warned Wormwood about that just is around certain people.
yeah, exactly. That was my grandfather. That was him exactly. Yep.
It's like some people do good their entire lives, and nobody's perfect. We all know that. But at the end of the day, you know, there does seem to be these people that whatever suffering they're going through, find the joy in serving and find the joy in i- in any like are able to find joy in whatever their vocation is, whatever worthwhile work, whatever sacrifices that they have to make for other people. And mhm.
And I want to add, because when you said that, it just clicked in my mind. The idea is that they don't care who that joy comes from or who the service comes from, right? That's back to the architect. I think that's a really important point. That it doesn't matter who's doing good, they're celebrating that good, aside from applying, you know, any vanity to it. It's just, yay, look at this beautiful thing that's now in the world because someone did this. Me, I did, or someone, and it doesn't matter if it was me or someone else. So I think it's a super important point and a hard one. I mean, who doesn't want to celebrate their achievements, right? That's a hard one.
Yeah, I mean,
I won't say I'm capable of it. I would not be so. I don't know. I mean,
like
I'm
literally,
probably just.
Heidi, he
I don't
had
know if
so
I'm
many
being
accolades.
qualified or what.
Like he had so many accolades, that he just, I don't know, I'm just doing what I have to do. And I remember him sharing this story with me just like flippantly, because he was from a family of 8 kids, and it was during the Depression, and he remembered my aunt's his twin older siblings, because he was the youngest. And he's like, they were just so concerned about what I had, like what I wasn't going to get because it was Easter. And he said, I don't know, I just always thought I had a bunch of stuff. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, from the start, he was just like that. He was like, I don't know, okay, whatever, I'll just do it. And so the all I can say is that, while we're looking at the people we truly admire, we see the the people. I mean, who do you truly admire? And I would submit that those people that live for the glory of God and take everything no matter what, because they expect nothing in return. So this notion of false humility is really, really, it's not just sad and bad, it's also, you could be someone's hero someday. It's like, like I would say, did you choose a walk-on part in a cage for a lead role?
Walk on part in the war for a lead role in the cage.
In a cage. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, you're.
But I would like to welcome AJ, because thank you for coming, and I would really like to hear what you have to say. Please go ahead, sir.
But I just got a download in my spirit over this fascinating space, and I don't know my boundaries here, but I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna say what was led to me to say. And I'd hate to get into politics, but Donald Trump was killed on, or excuse me, attempted assassination on 7/13. And while you guys were talking about humility and being humble and talking about the past generations that were extremely humble, they understood something. And a verse of scripture came to me, 2 Chronicles 7:14, the day after 7:13. And, uh, what Second Chronicles tells us right here, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves, and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. And I think that the past generations understood that verse of scripture. I think that that was a cry, a call out. I'm sorry about my dog, but I think that I know for a fact that was God talking to us. With what's been going on and transpiring, and I think it is time for everybody to humble themselves. Those that have not will eventually have to, but the sooner the better. And so yeah, I think everybody on here I'm hearing is extremely humble, and I really appreciate you, all you guys, and your space, and I'll digress right there.
No, AJ, thank you so much. Thank you. And I wish you could have been here earlier. You can certainly hear the playback, because just to kind of tie what you're saying together, um, I was uh um I was sharing with a few people about, the fact that this this topic of humility gets flipped on its face. And basically, when we look at the blessings that we have, and so what I'm hearing you say is, you are you are tremendously appreciative of the fact that there is a man that is trying for not his own best benefit, right? Clearly he could have lived a comfortable life without having people try to kill him and trying to ruin his family. um he has been seen as an extremely arrogant, prideful, what did Joe Biden call him? Oh yeah, the morals of an alley cat. And this is the cool thing about this letter is because, and we'll get into it in the next chapter actually, is that in chapter 15, the angle changes. And I don't want to get too much into it, but point being that, you know, we've anybody with a brain and an understanding that every one of us is a human being must realize that in 2015, you know, Donald Trump was Donald Trump. In 2023, he's still Donald Trump, but something changed. Something
He
changed.
got humbled. He got humbled. I can see it. That man is humbled down.
And I
There's no
truly
question.
believe that that is a gift from the Lord. And so that's God's that is the divine mercy for one human being's soul. So it's not that, so it's not to say, Donald Trump is a human being like us. And, it was really heartwarming when I was like watching his granddaughter, come up and talk to him about like just, you give her like 3 minute speech where she's like, he gives us candy and soda when our parents aren't looking. And it was so adorable. It also like kind of made me think of my dad because like I felt like I was listening to my nieces, but that very tender moment of the human being that he is. And so if his granddaughter can see him in that light, and for all of us, you guys, how much more tenderly does the Lord look at us? Please go ahead, Heidi.
I was just thinking, I just want to throw this out because AJ, thanks for coming up. You brought up this idea of politicians in the past having an understanding of humility. I've been reading Thomas Jefferson's memoirs, and just to give you an idea, at the end of these chapters, he's talking about how he wrote the Declaration of Independence and all of this stuff. He ends the chapter with a line, and I paraphrase, but this is basically it. But I grow tired of thinking about myself, which to me is probably one of the greatest insights into his character and into the character of a truly great man, is that idea right there. It wasn't about me. So I just wanted to add that because I think that fits in really well with everything we've been talking about.
This is incredible, you guys. I can't thank you all enough. And as a matter of fact, I do have to tie it up in about 15 minutes. I mean, but again, I'm really just trying not to be so regimented about it because as you see, these conversations take a life of its own on, and it's all extremely valuable. Like obviously, nobody's rambled about any kind of anything. Every contribution that every person has made, CJ, Patrick dropped, Jen, God bless you. AJ, thank you so much. My beautiful co-host, please make sure that you're following them. Um, but this is we have to allow the conversation to go wherever it is supposed to, and but that being said, I actually do have to tie it up in about 15 minutes, so we'll get to letter 15 next week, and it's going to be the same great conversation. And I don't mind that we were sort of competing with with Donald Trump this evening because like and you know what, you guys know Diligent, right? So we're in like a spaces host group, and he had posted in our chat like every God-fearing American needs to be like in his space right now. Is like, Dill, I'm doing the work of Jesus. And you laugh, it's like, "Love you, Nance," whatever. But it's true. It's like we're not we're unpacking the things that they're like the current events that they're talking about. And I'm sorry, God bless you all. Thank you for like coming because this is for my money. There could be no better conversation than the underpinnings of everything we're watching, play out. And so, AJ, I really appreciate you coming and saying those things because that is the brass tacks of what is actually happening in this country, you know. And so to tie that into this entire conversation is, it's kind of a blessing to all of us, I think. So, if anybody wants to give a final thought, please put your hand up. But before that, we're going to go to, sorry, I can't read your name. I'm sorry, Greggy. Forgive me. Greggy D. Please go ahead, sir.
Uh, hey, thank you for having me. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone that's spoken before. I joined it in late, so I didn't get to join the whole thing. But what I wanted to say was, people are what matter. I don't give a crap about left, right, up, down, whatever you want to look at it. People are what matter. And those who forget that are the problem. Because we were all here, put here, without knowing anything. People are what matter. People are the point, and people are the end. I just wanted to say that. Thank you for letting me say it. And I appreciate the time. Y'all have a good
Greg?
night.
Greg, for all of our talking and all of our unpacking of the intellectual parts of the Lord and, our literary insights and, how we can liken this back to the gospel and, how much this conversation matters. You just said all that really matters, sir. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. And so let me make sure. Oh, yep. Following you for sure, because that is everything. People are what matter. And if we can remind that, and if we can keep that at the center of our hearts, every life, every human life has merit. People are what matter. And if we can reject our ego and love people in the best way possible, to tell the truth, even if it comes to a task of a argument. But if we can love each other through all of those things, that that is everything. And so back also to AJ's point too, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in that order. We can't have the third without the second. We can't have the second without the first. And the first is all that matters. That's the foundation. People matter. Please go ahead, Dominique.
Well, now I feel kind of lame. I can't follow Greggy. He did such a succinct, beautiful way of just wrapping up in a bow. But I'll try, Greggy, so bear with me. Um, I think, when we talk about humility and false humility, and at the end of the chapter, the last line is the sooner the man turns his attention outward, the better the enemy is pleased. And it's not that the enemy, it's not that God wants us to forget about who we are, but what he wants is he wants us to turn our gaze outward, and that's how we serve others. And that's the opposite of the false humility that says, oh no, I'm not that intelligent, oh no, I'm not that beautiful. That's actually bringing our attention back into ourselves rather than looking outwards, looking to God and being thankful for the gifts and the talents he gives us, the relationships, the friendships, the people in our lives that we should always be grateful for, even the thorns in our sides, because we all have a few of them, and I'm sure we are thorns to some people's sides at times. And if it's okay, I'd like to quote a passage of scripture, and then I'll be quiet for the rest of the night. um, Philippians 2:1-3. So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any incentive of love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfishness or conceit, but in humility count others better than yourselves.
If nobody else is gonna say it, I'll say it.
Sorry, I
Um,
had to reconnect. I apologize.
no,
Um,
you're
I
fine.
think
No, no,
everything else,
totally, totally.
I
they did.
started bouncing.
After Dominic right there, there needed to be a little brief silence for a second because that was nothing but the truth. Nothing but the truth.
And I
Thank you
missed
for
it.
speaking.
Phooey. I was bouncing back and forth and I had to hard quit. You know how we have to do. I apologize for the interruption because I think that something beautiful was happening and, you know, my technical difficulties got in the way. I apologize. Um, so sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Well,
um,
thanks for hosting, Honey Badger.
thank
Just wanted to circle back. I had my hand raised a little while ago, but
yeah,
and,
sure.
I don't know, to just what you were saying, where you surround yourself with intelligent people, and I think you and people you look up to, and I think a lot of us look up to you, and that story about your grandfather is very it's
My
moving. I
dad,
have a
my
yeah,
dad, he's my
my
dad.
my yeah, my well, I know we said out your dad. I think you went back another generation too there. Um, my grandfather was, he had 7 kids and hardships, and he was very smart but very humble. And what I wanted to say was, like, I work with like engineers, software engineers, hardware engineers, and a lot of times they're quiet and not. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but in any field, there's people that aren't as outgoing. They might a lot of times some of the smartest people are the humblest of people, and it's just like I think our job to bring that out of them, the good in everyone. In what can you learn from them? Like, you can have a great intelligent debate or conversation or just goof off, and everyone has those things in them. You just have to bring it out.
You know, CJ, you're absolutely right. But and I really, if you don't mind, I want to get back to what Dominique was saying because the last part the last part she quoted was convince a pretty woman she's ugly or a clever man that he's stupid. This is my takeaway from that. When we accept that, if we say, well, I'm not that good at this or that or the other thing, isn't that a way of rejecting God's gifts and not and keeping us from not putting in the work to cooperate with the talents and the blessings that God has given us? Want to say something, Dominique?
That's exactly the point, right? Would rather than turning outwards and giving thanks and glory to God for the gifts and the talents He gives us, we turn it in on ourselves and we make it all about us. When we say, oh, I'm not that good, I'm not that smart, I'm not that pretty, I'm not that worthwhile. So, no, 100% Heidi, Nancy, gosh. Ah!
Yeah, I would just add too that it's a false statement. The pretty girl never thinks she's ugly, and the clever man never thinks he's a fool. It's all about perception, and the idea is that the attempt is why it is so pleasing to Screwtape is because they're attempting it, because it's a lie. They're telling lies to pretend they're humble, so it's like a double whammy, so to speak, right?
Yeah, it's the
I mean, because
rejection of God's
that's the
gifts which keep us from, putting putting thought into function, putting thought into action. And I think that's the thing that perhaps we're all like, I will say for myself, because, we talked about this earlier, I love to think about what I used to do very well, right? I love to do, I love to like kind of rest on my laurels sometimes. And then I love to just think about doing good things and how great that would be versus, actually doing those great things. And, nobody, I'm not calling any, I will use myself as an example because, I mean, hey, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm bad at, but not necessarily because I could also be saying that to you to make myself look good in public and make you think, gee, Honey Badger is a wonderful person when she's really not at the end of the day. But I'm okay. Like you know what I mean? Like I'm decent, like okay, here's the thing. I really try to treat everybody the way I want to be treated and like not expect stuff in return. But there's a lot of stuff I'm not good at, especially okay, especially when I'm depressed or especially when I'm not feeling well, but particularly when I'm not praying and when I'm not turning everything over to the Lord, right? Um, Kirk, welcome.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Okay, are you a silly person?
Well, I just want to know if you guys wanted to see my penis.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. Bye.
Mm.
Couldn't even
And we're
tell a
back.
good joke.
Whatever. We're not going to say a single word about that because that's what they want when they do their thing. But you're dealing with the wrong lady, sir. No, and actually, it's because I've dealt with this a lot. So, you know, I have authentic pride in my ability to run a space. Does that make sense? So we have a. So I really got to close up, guys. You know, for everyone that came just recently, I apologize. I do need to tie this up because I have other work to do. I have to discipline myself because this is my happy time, but sometimes you have to put your nose to the grindstone. Doesn't that make sense? Anyways, I want to thank all of you so much for joining us. Please join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time and 10 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry, I live out on the left coast. Best I can do. Thoughts and prayers for Will. I think we need to send out a search party. Regardless, thank you guys. I love you and thank you so much for joining. I will see you soon. Take care. God bless.